One of my life philosophies comes from my dad teaching me how to water ski. He would say, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. My name's David Knack, Director of Sales and Partnerships with Ava, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who have impressive resumes and have earned a lot of respect. So I thought it would be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of their biggest mistakes they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. Today with me on Home Care Hindsight, I'm joined by Rachel Gartner, founder and CEO of Carework. Rachel, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited.
This is going to be a lot of fun. For people who don't know you and aren't familiar with your work, how would you introduce yourself?
If you say people who aren't familiar with my work, I feel like that drives me to explain my work. But if I just don't know somebody, I think what's more interesting to talk about is my family and my life. So I am Rachel Gartner. I live in South Georgia in a really rural town. I'm an Army wife. My husband is full-time AGR with the Georgia Army National Guard. We're really proud of that. And I'm a mom to two young kids. They are 7 and 3.5. And actually just this week are both in school for the first time ever. I'm going to have a normal work schedule, which is really exciting. And then I'm the founder of Carework. So I do home care hiring. That's all that we do here at Carework. I've been doing that now for 6 years at Carework. And we're really passionate about hiring military spouses. So that's a big part of what we do and what drives us.
I think one of the things that's special about, this is very mission oriented. This is very authentic to who you are as a person. It can be hard if you're traveling around to support the primary person's career in the military to have stability in your career as a military spouse. And so I think it's really special that you understand that in a really deep way. But also, these are really talented people who are often overlooked in the workforce.
Exactly. That's what makes Carework who we are, is we have an incredibly talented hiring pool who face obstacles. The moving around is a big one because they want to advance in their careers. They're incredibly driven people who want to have a real career, and they're having to start over every 2 to 3 years, if not more frequently than that. But also there's obstacles like most military families, especially if they have kids, they don't have backup care for their kids being sick or things like that. And a lot of traditional jobs really don't have a lot of flexibility for that. And so building that in and also just building a culture where we get that has been really powerful. And I could talk about that for a long time. I'm really passionate about what we do.
That's really exciting. There's not a good way to transition to this, but people who know me know that I get tired of small talk quickly. One of the things on the pre-show we were talking about, you're like, my therapist says, so I can tell you're somebody who's ready to dive in deep very quickly too, which I appreciate. But I always want to ask the question, and I can't do this in polite company, what kind of person are you? But on a podcast, when I think I kind of make the rules here, I can ask that whenever I want. So in order to ask the question, what kind of person are you? Plans get canceled and you get a half day to yourself known as bachelor time, or in your case, bachelorette time. What do you do?
So I think the first thing, and I hope there's other people out there with small children listening to this, is the first thing I would do is just absolutely panic. What should I do? Because it's so rare, especially my husband and I both work. We both have pretty demanding careers. We're trying to be great parents to these really little kids. We're trying to travel to see our families. There's not very much time where I'm just suddenly, I'm at home and there's nothing to do. So when it does happen, the first thing I do is panic, oh my goodness, this is my chance. Should I go work out? Should I organize all the closets in the house? Should I clean? Should I bake something? But I never get to sit down and read a book. Should I sit down and read a book? I should watch a movie. There's a solid chunk of time that is just panicking and trying to make a decision about this incredibly precious time. But that's happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was coming back from a work trip and my kids were at my in-laws' house and they weren't going to get back till the next morning. My husband had his National Guard drill that weekend, so he was working all day. And I was suddenly home by myself and I watched movies. It was like I didn't have the mental energy to read a book. But I never get to just sit down and watch a movie. And by the time the kids are in bed, I'm not going to stay awake long enough to watch a movie. So that's what I did. I sat around and ate a lot of snacks and I watched 3 movies in one day. And I have to say it was pretty glorious.
That sounds good. Okay, best snack and best movie you watched.
Okay, I'm a popcorn girly. It's like my favorite food. If I don't cook dinner for the family, I'm just going to eat popcorn. So I ate a lot of popcorn that day with some Ghirardelli dark chocolate. Like it really hit the spot. I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember what much. I do remember one, and it is the best one, is Sense and Sensibility.
Oh, sure.
One of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, that's great. That dovetails around to the book question, which is, it sounds like you've read a lot of Jane Austen in your life.
I was very into Jane Austen for a long time.
Nice. Yeah. I love that. On the popcorn bit, my hardware store, Lowe's, they can sponsor the show if they want, has just installed a popcorn machine. So I walked in to do a return, and I said to the person at the returns counter, hey, why does it smell so much like popcorn in here? And she just kind of like nods behind her. I turn around, and there is like an honest to God, like if you've been in the Chicago airport, they have like a popcorn dispenser. And it was like that, but in my Lowe's. And it was just like, thanks for shopping here. Here's popcorn. And it was unexpected, but very exciting.
No, that is brilliant marketing, because I bet a large portion of their consumers are like in the stage where they're buying houses and trying to renovate them, often also the stage that you have kids. I am the most loyal to the brands that have stuff for my kids. Why do I go to Starbucks as much as I do? Because my kids ask me because they want a cake pop. First of all, I just want to point out that you were like, my hardware store. And I thought you were going to be like, this like small town hardware store right now. You're like, my hardware store, Lowe's.
Yeah, my local grocery store, Kroger. You might have heard of it. No, we've got some little stuff here in Jackson, Tennessee too. Yeah, but no, Lowe's has got a serious footprint. Okay, well, that was fun. We're going to transition. And again, I need to work on these transitions and be better at it. I bring really accomplished people on who've done really impressive stuff, who've gotten great results for their businesses, for their clients, created great jobs for people, done all the things that business owners should do. And we're not going to talk about that today. Instead, we're going to talk about the big mistake that you made and all the things that led up to that, all the things that you learned from that. And so, Rachel, thanks for coming on the show to talk about this. You've done a lot of impressive stuff, but what's your big mistake?
Can I just talk about how much I love this concept?
Sure, go ahead.
So much, because this is a core part of, I think, why I am where I am, but also a core part of our culture at Carework. One of my life philosophies comes from my dad teaching me how to water ski. He would say, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough. And that became a core part of who I am, is because when I do fail or make a big mistake, I go, well, you know what? At least I know I'm trying really hard. And I thought about coming up with a trite mistake, because there's a lot of funny mistakes that I've made. I did not know what a conference call was when I started Carework. And I called a business mentor. I have this meeting coming up with 2 locations, and they asked me if I was going to send a link, or if they should, what are they talking about? And she goes, it's a conference call, Rachel. God. And I'll never forget that. And that's like a funny one that I can pull out at parties and be like, oh, it's so funny. I'm this adorable founder who didn't know what a conference call was. But if I'm really honest and I think about a mistake that I made that really hits deep, I think I'm getting chills on my arms right now. So I talk all the time about recruiting and retention. And I do national speaking events and podcasts and webinars. And I talk a lot about employee recognition. And I talk a lot about owner-involved employee recognition. Like, it just means more. In fact, it's a bullet point on a PowerPoint that I have given presentations on. Owner-involved recognition is so powerful. And I talk about building a system and building a process and how to make it work. Well, my company is growing, and it's grown really fast at times. And now I have a team of 70 employees that are amazing people. And if I'm honest, in the back of my mind, I know that I struggle with owner-involved recognition. I try, and there's a lot of fun things that we do, but it is hard. About 2 years ago, we sent out an employee survey. We do these anonymous employee surveys, especially in big times of growth, because we know that there's stuff that we're just not aware of, and we want to catch it before it becomes bigger. So we'll send out anonymous employee surveys, which, by the way, is like one of those things you do and you kind of pat yourself on the back. You're like, I'm listening, because
even before the results come back, you're like, oh, yeah. Done. Check that box.
You're like, I care. I am so good at this. Feels really good. Sometimes you get great ones back, and it feels really good. I got a response about 2 years ago from an employee that said, Rachel gets on podcasts and talks about recognizing your employees. And I'm just wondering when she's going to walk the walk, because we don't get that at all at Carework, and she does not do that for her own employees. I know. It makes me want to cry still. Like, I hate talking about it. It's painful.
I mean, it makes sense to me why this stands out to you. But I think the fact that you've chosen this to talk about, and it's clear that this has made a big impact on you and your business and your philosophy of leadership and all those sorts of things. But the question is, why didn't you just say, well, that's one disgruntled employee, their opinion doesn't matter, like whatever, and move on with the 69 other responses that were positive?
Well, first of all, we could have a whole therapy session here, because for most people, it's a lot easier to make a note of negative feedback, right? At the core of who I am and why I have a business, my intention is always to err on the side of generosity. That's actually a phrase I use a lot with my leadership team, is whenever possible, err on the side of generosity. I believe that about myself, and I want that so bad to be true. And when they said that, and I was confronted with the fact that to somebody at my company, that was not the experience they were having, and because I immediately knew that they were right. Like, as soon as I read it, it was like, I talk about this, I know this, I preach this, but if I'm honest with myself, I'm not doing it. I'm not walking the walk. It was that feeling where you're aware that there's something that you're not doing right or doing the best, and you know that, but like you almost hope it's not true and maybe nobody else sees it. I think the hardest thing about leading people as a job is that when you screw up and make mistakes, it impacts real people. When I read it, that's why it stuck with me, was because I immediately knew they were right and that it was a really fair point. It just hurt because it was like, man, I pride myself on being like a leader who really cares about our people and does the right thing for them. And even though that's my intention, they're right. I haven't done anything.
This is completely off topic, but it'll relate back around. My first job out of college, actually my second job out of college, I waited tables for a little while, and then I did catering for Panera. And I've had stressful jobs since then. I will never have a more stressful job than doing catering for Panera at 22, feeling like the weight of the world of these pharmaceutical reps getting lunches to their doctors is on my shoulders. And I had to be in like 17 places at once. And so I remember I went to the wrong cardiology clinic, and the other one was maybe a half mile away, but I went to the wrong one. And I stopped in the parking lot and it was totally empty. And I was like, oh, they're closed on Fridays or whatever. And I remember I was driving this blue Ford Focus and threw it in reverse, floored it backwards to do my little 3-point turn. And as I was zooming backwards as fast as possible, I thought, I hope there's not a curb back there. And there was. And I just exploded my tire. I drove on a flat tire to the correct office, brought in the food. I felt like a NASCAR pit crew because I changed I got the donut on there and got it to my next delivery in the 15-minute window between deliveries. But I feel like, I say all that to say, I think a lot of owners can relate to what you just described. When I talk with them, some of the things that we talk about is our best caregivers never get to hear from us because we know we can rely on them and they're out of sight, out of mind. There's enough stuff on fire in the business that it is so easy to just trust that that person is taking care of what they need to. And that works a lot of the time. But what happens when something changes with their client or their family or their work schedule and we're not plugged in the way that we need to? And as people grow and scale their business, it was so easy to be on a first name basis with every employee that we had. It was so easy to remember birthdays and kids' names and who was graduating and who needed care packages for back to school and all those kinds of things. And as we grow, like it just is no longer feasible to, on a one-to-one basis, just know inside of our brains that that's the way it is. And I find that what a lot of people I talk to are doing is they're throwing their blue Ford Focus in reverse and thinking, I hope there's not a curb back there. Because we're so stressed and pressed for time, there's never a good time to stop and build systems. So anyways, I say all that to say, when you got that response, what were the things that were missing that you immediately saw?
Systems. And you're right, like we had grown so much. And I think too, it's such a hard line because when you're growing a business, you have to give yourself grace that you're not going to get everything right the first time and that you can't be everywhere at once. Like you were saying, you have to get to the next place. You can't be everywhere at once. You're trying so hard. And when you're growing a business, you have to give yourself some grace that I'm not going to have everything all together at once. Is the reality for most people, especially if you're bootstrapping, where you can't just go out and hire all the hires that you need from day one, and you've got too many things on your plate, and it's very stressful. And when you are in that situation, you have to give yourself that, like, I know there are things that need to get done that haven't gotten done. I know there are systems I need to put in place that I haven't put in place. And the danger there is waiting to fix something that you know needs to be fixed until somebody points it out to you. And so that's where I was. I knew it. And ironically, because our 5-year anniversary for Carework was coming up, and we had picked out a bunch of t-shirts, sweatshirts, and swag, getting it mailed out was a massive task. And so months ahead of time, I had ordered all this stuff and sent it out to my house. I had gifts for every employee sitting in my office that I had not had time to mail out yet. When I read it and I shared it, my leadership team could see it too, and we talked about it. I was like, guys, this one's on me, because I did not realize that it was going to take as much time as, now that our team is so big, to mail all of these out. And I wanted them each to have a handwritten note inside. And like, that's the thing, is the intention was there. I wanted them all to have the gifts. I had paid for the gifts. They were sitting at my house. I was in the process of handwriting notes for every employee, but this system was not adequate anymore. Rather than confront that or prioritize that, I had let it slide. And so that, I think, made it extra painful. But we did learn from that. We learned, and we have different systems now. I also got help. I have somebody on my team now who also functions as an assistant to help keep track of things. Because part of growing a business to the level that we're growing, for me personally, there's a lot of just acknowledging that there are things that I'm not good at. I am not good at mailing stuff out. I want to be good at mailing stuff out, but I'm not. And so now our system for that is different. We have more automated platforms for mailing stuff out. I do notes differently. Our Christmas presents, because I do big Christmas presents every year for our team. All of that is being done differently now, with the awareness that I can't risk it all sitting at my house and I'm not able to get it out. We have systems now for birthday trackers and gift cards going out to every single employee with a note about how much we appreciate them. Because like you said, in the earlier days, it was a lot easier to keep track of that. And I have members on my team who are great about going in our group chat and being like, happy birthday, so-and-so, you know? And I love that. But the system was not adequate to make sure that nobody ever fell through the cracks. When you have a team that size, when one person falls through the cracks, they absolutely notice that. And it feels very personal to them. And so you want the recognition to feel personal, but you have to have a system underlying it. And that's what we have now, is we have systems in place to make sure that every birthday is noticed. If somebody on our team is having a baby, you know, in addition to paid parental leave, we have a system in place to say they're going to get, you know, a gift card and it's going to be sent out at this time and this is who's going to send it. So we really just had to set up the systems to scale the intention of what we were doing, because the intention was that everybody got a birthday, you know, happy birthday with some kind of gift. Everybody got a baby gift. Everybody got a Christmas gift. Everybody got a Carework anniversary gift. But the systems there had not grown with us. And so now we've really built the systems for that.
Part of the reason I'm excited that we're talking, and I feel like we're going to have a lot of other stuff to talk about down the line at Ava. This is the little plug. Sorry, everybody. Remembering birthdays, remembering work anniversaries, showing recognition for those retention bonuses. We know how hard it is to get people past the 30, 60, 90-day mark in the business. And so having stuff built in, automated, that does not get forgotten, that does not slip through the cracks, to be able to recognize people for those key milestones, as well as for great performance, baked into the heart of what we're doing. And we see firsthand from the data how important having a culture of recognition, having a culture of appreciation is to a business. And so I know that's something you coach owners on all the time. And I'm curious, how did all of this change the way that you're coaching your clients, that you're serving your clients?
Well, first, I just want to say to everybody that David did not make me choose that story as the story for the podcast. It just pairs really well with what you guys do, because it is so hard to scale employee recognition. But yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot. And it's just pairing the intention with the execution, because the intention was always there. We judge other people by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. I was judging myself by the intention to recognize every employee and to do these things and to send out gifts. That was my intention. But the execution was that a lot of times it wasn't happening. And so I was judging myself by my intention, but my employees were only feeling the actual action, right? And so that's what's changed, is we build these systems that now the execution is matching the intention, and it makes a big difference for our team. It really builds a more lovely relationship, because when people get those birthday gift cards or something, it does make a difference to them. That matters to them, to feel seen and to have a little gift. And I always look at it like it's such a small part of our budget, and it really is not that hard to do. But it has to be done consistently for it to make a difference. So I think it has changed a lot. We still get those employee surveys, and I still don't like the results of them sometimes, but it's so much better to know And that's what we really try to build, that culture at our company, is like, we want to know because we want to fix it. And telling our team time and time again, like, my intention is for you to have a great job where you love working, but I'm not blind to the fact that sometimes that's not going to be your experience. And if that's the case, I want to know and I want to make it right. And it's also built that trust with them, because I talked about that with the whole company on the next call. I was like, hey, we got this. I've never called out anybody, whoever wrote that. I want to thank you guys for your feedback, because this was a very fair call out and we're going to make a change. We're going to make it better. So I think it actually in the end built more trust with our team of, we read those surveys and we will take action on what you tell us.
Yeah, because how often do you fill out a survey and you're at a 10 out of 10 anger and you push it up to 12 just because you know you're screaming into the void and that nobody's going to do anything about it? And so I think the fact that you acknowledged the legitimacy of the claim, didn't make any excuses for the behavior, right? You had the best intentions. You had all kinds of mitigating circumstances that you could have shared about. Look, we're focusing on sales. We want to make sure that everybody continues to grow and that we have great jobs and we're doing all these things right. But instead, I think there's a lot of more power in saying, you know what, you're right. We dropped the ball on this one. Here's how we're going to make that right in the future. Your feedback is so instrumental to our growth as a company. Thanks for being part of the team.
Absolutely. We've done that several times. So I'll just say to anybody listening to this, if you're not doing employee surveys, you need to do them. Another one last summer was, we did not have paid federal holidays for part-time employees, which the vast majority of our team are. And this was coming from my mindset of, whenever I had part-time jobs, I never got paid holidays. It was just closed. We had a survey the last week of June that said, I really can't believe I don't get a paid holiday for the 4th of July. That week, that's what's great about being a small company, is we just were like, oh, wow, I didn't think people expected that with it being a part-time job, but they do. So we changed it that week. And again, it was the same thing of just going and taking responsibility and going, hey guys, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize how important that was to you guys, and we're going to make it right. But to get to that point, you have to be comfortable reading some pretty brutal surveys sometimes. Like, you have to be putting it out there and be willing to take the knife to the chest. I cringe every time I think about that recognition survey. That's the trade-off, to actually hear what your team is saying and do it.
If you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough. Thanks for sharing about your big wipeout.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Almost everybody I talk to who resonates with the direction of the show is like, which one of the 30 that I immediately go into cold sweats about?
So many that I think about. Mm-hmm.
We're going to move into our next segment. And normally I ask people to tell me something that they think is overrated or that's underrated. You're giving me a 2-for-1, which I feel like I owe you like money or something for. But we talk a lot about things that are buzzy, that are exciting in the industry. There's things that are overrated. There's things that are underrated. So let's start with the thing that you think is overrated, that people value too highly, but that you think is not actually that great.
Well, I mean, it can be great. So the reason these go hand in hand, what I think is overrated is really flashy new recruiting strategies. Just really overrated. Like, we're going to try something new and amazing, and then all of our recruiting problems are going to be solved because we're going to do this one flashy new thing that I heard about at a conference, which is like exciting. I love that people get excited about recruiting. Obviously, I love to talk about it. And there are times where we at Carework are like, wow, we found this new way to do something. This is so exciting. But can I pair it with the underrated?
Yeah, go ahead. What's the thing that's underrated?
The underrated is actually just having a defined recruiting process to start with. And so what people do is they get really excited about this new strategy, and then they go, oh, it's not actually fixing my recruiting. But if you don't have a actual defined process for recruiting, like, this is where applicants come from, this is how quickly we contact them, this is what we say, this is when we reach back out, this is the next step, this is what we send them. Like, if you haven't really invested time in that underlying process and measuring the results, don't even get me started. People don't measure any of the data. They just look at who's sitting in orientation, which I understand. But then they make a change and they go, well, it didn't really change who was sitting in orientation. But they might have changed that and changed something else at the same time that counteracted each other. Sure. Because there wasn't an underlying defined process. So I think overrated, big new flashy strategies, big new cool things that we're going to do. And underrated is just consistency, really. Like, what is your process? What's the baseline? And then make changes incrementally on that baseline.
I think the thing that is interesting to me about recruiting and sales and the way that they mirror one another is recruiting is sales. You are selling people on this job opportunity. When people get really discouraged by the rejection that happens in the recruitment process, but that happens every day in sales. But sales and recruiting are both looking for the silver bullet. What's the one change you can make that's going to 10x your results in terms of number of applicants, in terms of close rate, in terms of folks sticking around to 90 days? And what I'm hearing you say is there's no silver bullets.
There's none. I have to tell people this all the time because we get people that come to Carework and want to sign up with us and get suddenly completely different results, but don't let us make any changes to their recruiting process. So this is the way we've always done it. It's a waste of time if they come in without the paperwork done. Nope. And I have to tell people, we're not magic. We're a great team and we have great strategies. But if you bring in a recruiting team and you tell them, I want you to do things the way that you've always done it, and I want drastically different results and I want them right now, that's not going to happen because you have to actually make changes to see different results, but you have to start with a baseline. And it's exactly true. And I understand that. I get the mindset behind that, why people want recruiting fixed right away. But the other danger there is everybody knows that recruiting is a struggle for everyone. It can honestly be easy for people to stick their head in their sand that they don't have a good recruiting process and it's not consistent, because when they're understaffed, they go, well, everybody's understaffed. And so it's that balance of, no, there's no silver bullet. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to fix it in one day. But also, there are ways to make incremental changes and improve it. And if you don't start with, we have a solid process of who's doing this and what they're doing every day, it's very hard to make improvement.
Yeah. Recruiting, staffing shortages, retention, that whole frustration of beating your head against the wall. Like, it's hard out there. We talk to owners every day who are struggling with making sure they've got enough caregivers and caregivers they can rely on. The average turnover in this industry is 79.2%. That's not going to change. And add on top of that, these owners are having to hire, it's like a third of their caregiver census that keeps turning over and over and over again. And you got to keep replacing those people. And it can feel like you're pushing the rock up the hill and it rolls back down and you're doing it again. But what we've seen, and I know you've got some data from people who use your service as well, is that you can get that rock a little bit further up the hill. Maybe you can start at a different place at the bottom of the hill. And it's always going to be a challenge in this business because the business is people and people are unpredictable and hard to work with. I wouldn't want to work with me sometimes, but there are absolutely ways that we can make little changes that have huge impacts down the way, but it's not going to happen overnight.
That's exactly right. When you look at the average, there are people that are doing better than the average. And that's what we want people to walk away with, is it actually is possible to be successful, and it's possible to be really successful. I work with agencies that are expanding rapidly because they're hiring so many caregivers. But I think what it comes back to is this concept I talk a lot about when people want to improve their show up rates in particular. They'll go, well, if just more people showed up. And it's like, yes, I wish that more people showed up to the interviews we schedule or the orientations. But what you have to do is look at it, how do we plan around the current reality that's in front of us and also try to improve that reality? It has to be both. If the reality is that turnover is high, business-wise, you have to plan for the fact that turnover is high and hire enough caregivers to continue growing your business. Also, try to improve your turnover rate because you can make improvements. And those little changes over time add up to really different results. And that's how some agencies are growing so quickly, is they've just bit by bit made the little changes to get a little further up the hill. And that adds up over time in a massive way, especially when you do that at every step of the process. This gets a little bit better. This is improved by 3%. This is improved by 5%. That adds up.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we have talked about a big mistake that you made. Thanks for sharing. What is a little mistake that you see home care owners making all the time that if they stopped, it would make their lives or their business 10 times better?
Complaining about caregivers out loud, especially down the chain of command, maybe too military of a term. I don't know what else it's called. But when a leader complains about caregivers out loud, it defines your culture. And when your culture is such that caregivers are irresponsible, they don't want to work, they don't want to show up, that influences all of the micro decisions that your team is making that you can't micromanage. And so we have leaders out there that will stand in their office and complain down the chain of command about how irritated they are about caregivers. And they don't realize they're building their whole culture of their agency which is going to influence the tone of the way people talk to caregivers. It's going to influence your recruiting process in massive ways, because when your recruiting team is like, we don't want to waste our time with people who might not, whatever, that comes from a leader who stands around in the office and is like, I'm just so done with working with caregivers, which is horrible. If you need to complain, which I get, it's a difficult industry. And I get that even leaders, they need to vent sometimes, and that is fine. Don't vent to your employees. Go home and vent to your family, vent to your friends, vent to other home care agency owners. If you need to vent, don't do it to your team, who then are learning from you how to look at caregivers.
A good note about leadership is that sets the tone, and all of the different ways that posture and temperature of the room impacts all the things makes such a big difference.
And we've seen it be a big mistake too. We've seen some pretty harsh stuff. It all started with leaders who thought nobody was listening or nobody was really paying attention, or they just want the camaraderie, with their team. And I get that. I really get that. But that is probably, I would say it's a little mistake that actually turns into a really big mistake.
Yeah, it snowballs quickly. Well, we've talked a lot about mistakes, and that's been fun. And I think we can learn a lot of those things. But I like to end every episode talking about something that's gone really well. And so, Rachel, what's your win of the week or of the last little bit?
This one's really fun for me. We have an agency that we just wrote a case study for, which is always super fun, but they've cut their caregiver turnover by 25%. It's home helpers in Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you, the reason that has worked for them is actually the entire culture of their agency. It is so great to work with agencies who have that caregiver-first mindset and are growing and successful. It's really cool when we can be a part of it. In fact, they sent their Carework account manager a gladiator meme back in April when they met a huge goal. They have that camaraderie with us to send a meme and be like, we did it, It was really, really fun. Yeah, I love doing case studies because it's really cool. Like you said, it's a hard industry, and we talk a lot with people who are having a hard time and struggling, and we're trying to help them and make changes. And then every now and then we're connected with agencies like this who are so open to trying new things, so caregiver first, their whole team is bought in. And then we get a win like this where they look and go, we cut our caregiver turnover by 25%. And that is just so encouraging to see. It is possible and it's happening. They've really done that by their relationship building with caregivers, which is so aligned with Carework's philosophy that it's really fun to see.
We'll link that case study in the show notes when we publish this episode. If you're interested in learning about that or the work that Carework does, we're going to link that below. We're going to go to our last segment here in just a second, which is called Home Care Hot Take. But Rachel, before we go there, how can people find you? What would you like to plug?
You can find us at careworkus.com. That's Carework, not Careworks. careworkus.com. And if anybody knows the domain holder for carework.com, I've been filling out those forms online for 5 years. I will pay you for this domain. But yeah, you can find us at careworkus.com. And really the heart of what we do is we're a scalable recruiting team, because for most agencies, as you get more applicants, your applicant volume increases, but the applicant experience decreases because it's very hard to scale your recruiting practices. That's what Carework does. We work with a lot of small agencies. We work with some very large agencies that have 2 states covered. And it's the scalable recruiting team is what we do. We can implement best recruiting practices at scale. We can grow with you. And we love to do it. It's fun. We get to work with agencies that are growing.
Yeah. Rachel, one of the things that I think has come through in this conversation, but that every time I talk to you is the case, is not all business owners are having fun. I think you have a lot of fun.
I have a lot of fun a lot of the time, but no, we're at a fun point. And I think I'm really passionate. I want home care agencies to feel hopeful about recruiting because it is really hard and it takes a lot of intention. And so our strategies are super data-based. I will challenge people on bad practices. There's so much doom and gloom out there that is really not helpful for agencies that want to grow, that I try to be very clear of it is possible and it can work and it can be really fun and rewarding. So I'm glad that comes through.
Rachel, we're going to go to our last segment here, which is called Home Care Hot Take. And I threw together some questions. I just want to give you a minute because I feel like you're probably going to have some opinions about these things. So I'm just going to set them up for you and then talk about them. Tell the people what you think. So when screening candidates for caregiving roles, the most important quality to look for is
somebody who wants to be talking with you. If they want to talk with you and they pick up the phone, you're already so far down the line. Because other than that, it's really hard. We don't have a crystal ball. A lot of caregivers have a great interview and then never show up again. And a lot of caregivers have like maybe a not great interview and give them a chance and they end up being amazing. So I think if you can just get somebody in there and talk with them and have a good conversation, most other things can be trained.
One thing that should be part of every agency's hiring practice is
analyzing your recruiting metrics. You should know how many applicants you're getting a month, how many are scheduling interviews, how many are showing up, and what the outcome is. Because if not, you are throwing spaghetti at a wall. You can't make progress if you don't know your baseline and what metric you're trying to improve.
the most overlooked source of quality candidates for home care positions is
referrals. They're not overlooked, they're underfunded. So for home care agencies, when they do referral bonuses that are $50, $100, and then you go look at your cost per hire for online job ads is like $500, $600.
Yeah.
Fund your referral program better because you're going to get better caregivers and they're going to stay longer. And it's going to cost you a lot of money to hire them from online ads anyway. So I think referral programs are way underfunded. And I get it. I get why. But when you look at the numbers of what it's going to cost you to get it the same hire online and how much longer a referral stays.
Yeah. If you had to put a number on what every agency's referral bonus should be, what is that number?
Well, there's no silver bullet.
Okay, fine.
David, actually, there's no silver bullet. But what I tell agencies when they're struggling with this, go actually look at what your cost per hire is on online job ads, and you can probably double it because when you look at the data on how much longer a referred caregiver stays, you can spend way more on a referral bonus than you do on online job ads. Then when you do that math and it comes out to like $1,000 bonus for your referral program, that sounds insane. But people will not want to do it, and then they will go up their Indeed budget and up their Indeed budget and up their Indeed budget. And it's like, you actually are spending more than that. Like, spend it on your referral program instead.
To stand out as an employer in a competitive job market, agencies need to
simplify their hiring process. I talk about this all the time. And the mindset behind not doing it is like, if they can't fill the paperwork out, they're not going to show up. No, because they're going to show up to the place that told them to come in and they'll do the paperwork with them. They're showing up somewhere. It's just not going to be with you. They're going to go show up at the agency down the road. So to stand out, you have to simplify the process and get them in the door as quickly as possible.
The biggest trend shaping home care recruitment in the next 5 years will be?
I really hope it's embracing a caregiver-first mindset because that's what I preach about all the time. If you actually fully embrace a caregiver-first mindset, it makes a massive difference for the results of your agency and for the quality of the care that you provide. So, number one, foundational, get your mind right about caregivers and valuing them, and building your recruiting process around their needs, not yours, will follow.
That's awesome. That's a great place to end it. Rachel, thanks again for coming on the show today. This was a ton of fun. I think this is going to be a really great episode for our listeners. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
On behalf of the team here at Ava, thanks for listening to our show. We'll be back next week with another episode. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen. If you have feedback on the show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or send us an email to podcast@joinava.com. Thanks. And remember, the year may be 2024, but hindsight is always 2020.